Hello, my name's Dr. Sarah Roddy. I'm a historian at the History Department in Maynooth University, and I'm here today in the sunny southeast in Wexford, which is living up to its name today. And we're going to be talking about a project that I've just started with partners in Notre Dame University. And the project is all about churches, Catholic churches, and the amazing social heritage that is inside them and how we're going to help to preserve that in some small way. So there are 3,000 churches across the island of Ireland, most of them built in the 19th century and afterwards. And if you know anything about 19th century Ireland, you'll know that it was a very poor place. It was a century of famine and mass emigration and not much industry and so on. And yet, through the voluntary contributions of ordinary people, rich and poor, at home and abroad, they managed to build 3,000 churches, many of them magnificent, large, imposing, like the one you see behind me. And the question is, how did they manage to do that? So I'm writing a book about that at the moment. So in the course of my research for this book, I've realised that as well as lots of interesting stuff in the archives themselves, you have the churches, which are an important source. And they're an important source not just for me and my project, but I've realised that they're a really important source for many other types of researchers, and I'll explain a bit more about that shortly. So I'm standing here outside St Aidan's Cathedral in Enniscorthy, which is the seat of the Bishop of Ferns, and this is the largest of the buildings that the famous Gothic architect Augustus Welby-Pugin built in Ireland, the largest of many churches that he built. So the cathedral was built in the 1840s, which, as you know, was also the period of the Great Famine in Ireland. And it's really a testament to the faith of the Catholic people of Enniscorthy that even in the midst of all that crisis, their priority was building a church of this size and magnificence. So I've come inside St Aidan's Cathedral. Some would say that the Houses of Parliament in London are Pugin's masterpiece. Others might say that St Aidan's runs it close. And as you look around at all of the beautiful interior decoration, you may agree. But I'm not so interested in the decor, beautiful as it is. I'm more interested in all of the inscription plaques that you see lining the walls, which commemorate all of those people from Enniscorthy and elsewhere who helped to contribute to the £8,000 cost of this building back in the 1840s. So inside most of the Catholic churches in Ireland, you'll find that many elements of the building and the furniture and fittings are inscribed with the names of at least some of the parishioners who actually donated the money that built them. You have dedications on stained glass windows, carved into altars, on pulpits, on confessionals, on fonts, and on brass plaques found on walls and pews and all sorts of other areas. And essentially, you start to think that anything that cost money within the church and had room for a name could wind up having a dedication inscribed on it. Some churches have hundreds of these inscriptions, some have only a handful, but they're often very rich in terms of the information that they offer. They can contain a really significant amount of data on local and on diaspora populations connected to particular parishes. So obviously you have donor names, all of those Murphys and Kellys and Keoughs and Walshes and O'Briens and so on. But you also have very often birth dates, death dates, sometimes addresses, even down to the street number, occupations, and even hints on family and social relationships. And this is all data that could be hugely valuable to social historians and local historians, but also very much to genealogists and anyone who's interested in researching their ancestry in Ireland. And I found this myself when I was able to trace a Roddy window paid for by a great-granduncle of mine in County Westmeath. I'm here inside St Mary and St Michael Church in New Ross in County Wexford, and this is a church that was built between 1894 and 1902, and it was built very much at the instigation and the initiation of the parishioners. In front of me here in the church there's a plaque that credits the priest with really driving the building of this magnificent church, the church that was to replace the more modest church further down the hill. But really, he didn't want anything as grand as this, and it was the donors, the parishioners, who wanted something that rivalled St Aidan's Cathedral in Enniscorthy. That's really a good example of why so many churches in Ireland have donor inscriptions all over them. And this is just like many other churches. On the windows, on the pulpit, on the sides of some of the altars and so forth, you'll see lots of the names of those donors who made their parish priest build this fantastic church back in the 1890s. And of course, we've been looking at churches in County Wexford in the Diocese of Ferns, but this is true of churches all across Ireland. Churches in Swinford in County Mayo, in Limerick, in Ballinrobe, in Ballybay, in Monaghan, places like Ballyjamesduff or County Roscommon or County Westmeath, Mountmellick in County Laois. Wherever you go, you will find Catholic churches, and inside them often inscriptions with the names of the people who helped to build them. So we've seen so far how valuable all of this social heritage, all of these inscriptions in thousands of churches across Ireland could and can be for researchers of all kinds. But there is a problem, and if you're interested in finding out your family history and you think there may be a window somewhere, you need to know exactly where it is in order to actually go and access it. And you need to actually visit it in order to see that inscription. Second of all, if you actually arrive at that church, you could very well find, depending on the time of day, depending on the time of year, that the door is closed. Increasingly there's a priest shortage in Ireland, and we see churches having limited opening hours during the day. Sometimes accessing these inscriptions in particular churches is very difficult for our researchers. But even more urgently, I think, in the next few years, I think partly to do with that priest shortage, we're going to see a number of these churches actually close their doors for good and be converted into use as many other types of building. And when that happens, we're going to see, hopefully, the buildings themselves, the architectural features preserved and protected. But the interiors will change according to whatever use the churches are converted to. And when that happens, we're going to see the social heritage that we've been talking about, all of those plaques and all of those fixtures and fittings with valuable social information on them, be lost. And I think that would be a real shame. So what can we do about all of these problems of access to all of this really fascinating information and data? How can we make things easier for all of those different researchers? Well, the solution is a pretty simple one actually, and that's what this project in partnership with Notre Dame is seeking to do. So what we're going to do is capture all of these inscriptions in all of these churches around Ireland photographically. We're going to input them into a database, digitize that database, and then make it freely available as a searchable resource on the internet, freely available around the world to anyone who is interested in a particular church or wants to know more about their family history in Ireland and thinks that their ancestor might well have donated towards one of these churches. In doing that, in creating that database, I think we'd be doing two things. So first of all, we'd obviously be creating a really valuable research resource for all kinds of people. Social historians like me, local historians, genealogists, family historians, and all kinds of people like that. But at the same time, I think what's really important to recognise is that we'd also be doing, in a small way, a service towards preserving this one small part of this really important national heritage asset. So I think it's fair to say that whatever Ireland's religious status might be in the present and whatever it might be in the future, that its religious past is very, very rich. And that clearly the Catholic churches that we've looked at and all of those churches across Ireland are a really, really valuable and important material legacy from our ancestors, essentially. They worshipped in them, they were baptised in them, they married in them, they were laid to rest in them, and they funded them. And I think we should do everything that we can to preserve this really important legacy. And all that it can tell us about the last 200 years of Irish history, all that it can tell us about our families and about the essence of who we are. I'm really excited to partner with Notre Dame in this project and do just that.